Good evening and welcome to the first meeting in our process to update the Sonoma County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP. Thank you for joining us tonight and contributing your time to help prepare where you live for wildfire. My name is Tracy Cattleman. I will be facilitating tonight's meeting on behalf of Permit Sonoma. Tonight's meeting is a basic introduction to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP, process. This is the earliest stage of public involvement. We will provide you with an overview of the process and how you can participate in it. We want to hear from you. This is a community wildfire protection plan. Bienvenidos a nuestros vecinos quienes prefieren hablar en español. Tenemos interpretación disponible hoy gracias a Eduardo Hernández. Eduardo es un planificador del condado de Sonoma y nos está ayudando esta tarde con la traducción. Para participar en español, puede ir a Interpretación abajo, acá, al lado derecho de su pantalla. Desde ahí puede elegir entre inglés y español. Finalmente, para escuchar el canal de español mejor, puede silenciar el audio original. Cualquier duda, por favor, mándenos un mensaje por chat. And for those of you new to Zoom, or for the rest of us who could use a refresher, we have a few ways to participate tonight via Zoom. On the bottom of your screen, in the middle, and starting from your left, please use the Zoom chat function to send us a message or to add more information to your poll answers. It looks like that, the icon. We're not going to be using the raise hand feature during the presentation tonight. We will be using the question and answer feature. So using the question and answer button or icon, Q&A, to submit your questions throughout the meeting. There's also an upvote option if someone asks a question similar to what you want to ask or to show your interest in the same question. We'll show you how to use that shortly. And finally, if you'd like to hear the meeting in Spanish, you can select that via the interpretation button on the bottom right of your screen, which I just explained in Spanish. Finally, Zoom provides a couple of options for your audio. If you don't have a great internet connection or having a hard time hearing us, click on the up arrow next to the audio icon, which is over here by the microphone at the bottom left of your screen. From there, you can choose to switch to phone audio and follow the instructions to link your audio and video or computer connection. And if I could ask the Zoom host to mute everybody who's not speaking, that would be great. We'll be providing information tonight about the CWPP process. Following this meeting, you'll be able to get more information and stay updated through the following links. And Kaylin is going to be sharing those with you in the chat at the same time right now. Those links are the Permit Sonoma CWPP website, which is sonomacounty.ca.gov /fire-prevention/wildfire-plan. Again, that will be in the chat. The Fire Safe Sonoma website is www.firesafesonoma, all one word, .org. And we have an email address that we've set up for this process, for the CWP process. And that email is permitsonoma-wildfireplan@sonomacounty.org. So feel free to write to us there about this process with any questions, and we'll be sharing that with you throughout the meeting tonight. And finally, you can find us on social media via the Permit Sonoma Facebook and Twitter accounts, which are facebook.com/SonomaCountyPRMD. That stands for Permit Resources and Management Department, facebook.com/SonomaCountyPRMD, and Twitter @SoCoPRMD or @SOCOPRMD. Finally, we're recording tonight's meeting and it will be available soon via the Permit Sonoma YouTube channel, and where it will also have closed captioning. So now I have the great honor to introduce the project leaders for this CWPP update, Caroline Safford and Esther Mandano, and give them an opportunity to say a few words. Caroline Safford is a department analyst with the Fire Prevention Division at Permit Sonoma, and Esther Mandano is a GIS specialist with Digital Mapping Solutions. Go ahead, Caroline, take it away.
Hello all. I know there are a ton of familiar names and faces out there in Zoom land, and special hello to all of you, and thank you so much for participating in the CWPP process. I am really very excited about this kickoff. I'm Carol Safford, and I'm the project lead for the CWPP for Permit Sonoma. I've been working in wildfire for many years in our county, both for the County of Sonoma and the Fire Prevention Division, but also for many years with Fire Safe Sonoma, our countywide Fire Safe Council. Roberta will be speaking a bit in a little while. I'm also a resident of an at-risk wildland urban interface community where I was a volunteer firefighter for many, many years. You know, so much has changed since we signed the 2016 CWPP. In many ways, it feels like a completely different world, especially in regards to wildfire. Despite the tragic losses in our county over the last 5 years, I remain really hopeful that there is a lot that we can do, both as individuals, agencies, and communities to reduce wildfire risk. I'm thrilled to be launching the update of the CWPP because it will give us the opportunity to collaboratively look at our assets, our risks, and solutions. I'm especially excited to be working with Esther Mandino of Digital Mapping Solutions and her awesome team. So with that, I'll pass it over to Esther.
Hello, everyone. My name's Esther Mandino. Thanks for joining us at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Really appreciate you being here. I have a background in fire ecology, and I live here in Sonoma County. And I won't say too much about myself because I've got a lot to cover. We should get to it.
Thank you so much, Esther and Carleon. Now, Chief James Williams, the Sonoma County Fire Marshal, will introduce the Permit Sonoma team. And let's make sure he's unmuted. Go ahead, Chief.
Good evening, and thanks to all for your participation tonight in this great occasion. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan, really is a great start at many of the programs and things that we're doing in Sonoma County towards helping to create a safer and more resilient fire safe community. So our staff have a great team of individuals with a lot of experience. And as Carleon just introduced herself, but I'm going to just mention her again. Carleon has been a great asset to our organization, our team, with years of background and experience, whether it comes from the fire response and suppression side to fire prevention and wildland fire safety, the author of the county's first Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2016. Lisa Hewlett, who is our grants program manager, managing not only the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, but several other key grants that have some level of relationship to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And we also have Domenica Giovannini, who is our marketing specialist, who will be doing a lot of the outreach to the public, helping with the social media, and has just been a great asset to the team as well. And then myself, James Williams, the County Fire Warden or Fire Marshal, and I have the privilege of working with many different fire agencies throughout Sonoma County, including our partners with CAL FIRE and many of the fire protection districts throughout the county. And we all have that same goal in mind, and that's to create the safest the safest community in terms of wildfire protection and creating, again, an environment where all can enjoy a fine quality of life here in Sonoma County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Williams. And now Esther Mandino from Digital Mapping Solutions will introduce our consultant team. Take it away, Esther. And you're muted, Esther.
Thank you, Tracy.
No problem. Go ahead.
Good evening. Buenas noches. Me llamo Petronila Esther Medeno, but you can call me Esther. I'm a small business owner located here in Sonoma County. I specialize in applying geographic information applications in natural resource management and wildland fire planning and mitigation. For this project, I partnered with Tracy Kettleman of Forever Green Forestry, along with Mark Tuckman of Tuckman Geospatial, and Carol Rice of Wildland Resource Management. Tracy and Carol have extensive experience in developing community wildfire protection plans, and Mark is a spatial data expert. He's also a Sonoma County resident who lost his home in the Tubbs fire. I will work closely with Carleon as a partner in project management. Tracy will be helping with public outreach and engagement, And Mark will handle the hazard risk assessment and all our mapping needs. And Carol will offer her expertise in document and policy review.
Thank you, Esther. And FireSafe Sonoma, the countywide FireSafe Council for Sonoma County, is a key partner in the CWP process. As you will learn later, FireSafe Sonoma, actually Chief Williams just mentioned, FireSafe Sonoma facilitated the previous version of the CWPP, for which we're beginning our update process tonight. I'd like to introduce Roberta McIntyre, the President and CEO of FireSafe Sonoma, to say a few words about their role in this process. Welcome, Roberta.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And thank you guys, all 66 plus of you, for showing up tonight on a weeknight to help out with this. I'm the president and CEO of FireSafe Sonoma. FireSafe Sonoma is a countywide FireSafe council that's been in existence for over 20 years now. And our role fundamentally in this CWPP development process is to provide a vehicle or a means for our local fire safe councils, community groups, HOAs to work through us to make sure that any issues you have do actually get addressed in the process. So there's going to be a lot of different ways of accessing the staff creating the CWPP. And one of those ways that I think is going to be very fundamental is through our organization, FireSafe Sonoma. And we intend to and currently are working with CERT folks. We're working with various community groups around the county. We're engaged with the law of the Cwpp groups. There's 8 or 9 fire safe councils that we regularly engage with, local fire safe councils within Sonoma County. There's RCDs we're engaged with, map your neighborhood out in West County. So we are basically going to act as a representative for all of you folks when we have our discussions with the working group to make sure that everything gets addressed. So that's it. Thank you. Welcome.
There we go. And working alongside, let's see if I can get my mouse to work here. Working alongside the countywide umbrella of FireSafe Sonoma, there are many community level wildfire preparedness groups in Sonoma County, which Roberta just alluded to. Could you tell us a little bit more about these groups and who they are and what they do?
There's a lot of different groups. They vary from homeowners associations to Cwpp groups to actual local fire safe councils. And our relationship to those groups is such that, and other groups, there's several that actually don't even have technical titles, I think. But our relationship or our purpose for engaging with them is if they have, as part of their organization, an interest in becoming more wildland fire safe within their local community, they can lean on FireSafe Sonoma for resources, for help with grant applications, help with local projects, help with sharing information. A lot of stuff going on that we can do for you. Also, just so you all know, we routinely engage with the Sonoma County Fire Prevention Officers Association and the Sonoma County Fire Chiefs Association, as well as other community groups. The Sonoma Ecology Center we engage with routinely. So anybody that has anything to do with wildland fire in Sonoma County, we're pretty much engaged with them and acting on the behalf of the folks in their homes, at the ground level. Some of us like to call that ground zero. And also, just one last thing, if anybody here knows of any local groups that want to form or have formed that maybe we're not aware of, feel free to let us know through our website or through our email. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. And finally, and certainly last but not least, our fire agency partners throughout Sonoma County are critical to this CWPP update and the long-term safety of Sonoma County residents. Caroline Safford, again from Permit Sonoma, will share with us more about the important role of your local fire agencies in this process. Go ahead. Carolyn, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Zoom foul. Oops. So fire agencies. This is a map of all the fire agencies in the county. And I know that this map is pretty hard to see because there's a lot of very small words on there. That's because there are, in fact, a lot of fire agencies in our county. Every one of them, from large districts and municipal fire departments down to small, all volunteer departments, each will have a critical role in the development of the CWPP. Now, CAL FIRE is our state fire agency, and we're lucky to have with us this evening West Division Chief Ben Nichols, who is also on our CWPP steering committee, who will now ping in to say a few words about CAL FIRE and your role in this process. Chief?
Thank you, Carolyn. So as Carolyn has mentioned to many groups since 2017, that prior to 2017, this was still something that was near and dear to Carolyn's heart. However, the citizens across Sonoma County hadn't been impacted by frequent large fires. And unfortunately, we broke that habit in 17, and we continue to set new records year after year as we push forward. So as it's been identified out there are many different groups that are coming to address this problem. And the takeaway for the group tonight is that no one group or organization can do it by themselves. So when we come together to create these community wildfire protection plans, it brings a bunch of stakeholders together that maybe historically didn't have the reason to come together, so that we can bring ideas from across the board and condense them into a document or a function that helps protect the county from our future fire events that we know we're going to have. It identifies the priorities in a science-based approach. It brings in information, and we collaboratively come together on prioritizing what those projects need to be in order to make the most impact to life, property, and the environment as it relates to future wildland fire events. And finally, as we work through the process, this finalized packaged CWPP creates a clear and concise route that the county and the constituents want to go, so that with the available grant resources out there on so many different levels, it enables the county and the communities here to be able to clearly and concisely articulate the need that is here in the county to protect our communities from future wildfire events. And then something very near and dear to my heart at this point is that it also provides the ability to recommend measures to folks throughout the county as it relates to home hardening and defensible space, so that again, we can do everything we can to prevent unneeded and needless loss of life and property in future fire events. So really looking forward to working with the stakeholders and the community as a whole here as we develop this project to push forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Carolyn, was there anything else you wanted to add on fire agencies?
No, we're just looking forward to getting everybody's in the process together.
Thank you. We're getting some questions. We will be responding to those a little bit later through our Q&A session. But first, we want to do a poll. And Amanda, you can go ahead and launch that. We want to wrap up this section of the agenda with a poll to find out who is here with us. So if you could look at the poll and answer which district you're in which supervisorial district do you live. In qué distrito de supervisión vive? First is Susan Gorin, second, David Rabbit, third district, Chris Corsi, fourth district, James Gore, fifth district, Linda Hopkins. And if you don't live in Sonoma County, please select option 6. And Kaylin has just posted into the chat a link to find your district if you're not sure where you live. And you can also look at the map on the screen. And by the way, the poll that's on your screen, I think you can move around on your screen, and you can also scroll if you need to. And we're going to give it just another 20 seconds or so for folks to respond. Okay, Amanda, could you go ahead and share those poll results with us? And you will see that we have almost 40%, 22 folks in the first district. We've got one visitor from the second district, several from the third district, 10 from the fourth district, 12 from the fifth district, and another 8 folks who aren't here in Sonoma County. So thanks, everybody. And I'm going to stop sharing that and we will move on. So Carol Leon, Stafford again from Permit Sonoma, is now going to introduce you to what a CWPP is. As we mentioned, Carol Leon was the lead author of the 2016 CWPP and is now at the county. She's going to talk about why it's important for us to have an updated CWPP. Go ahead, Carol Leon.
So the CWPP process was originally defined in the U.S. Congress's Healthy Forest Restoration Act in 2003. And it was, at base, it was an effort to bring together all of the stakeholders in wildland-urban interface fire, be they from federal, state, local agencies or community groups, so that if somebody wanted to launch a project in a given area, there was some communication that was going on between the agency and the community and the community and the agency. And this was important not only because it makes the projects better, but it also encourages efficient spending of the grant money that goes out there to do wildfire projects. So the idea was to collaboratively identify what the wildfire issues and risks are, and then prioritize the areas and the strategies to reduce risk in those landscapes. There are 3 minimum requirements as set up in the Healthy Forest Restoration Act for a community wildfire protection plan. And those are, 1, it must be collaboratively developed with input from community members and community groups, very important, local agencies and cooperators, state agencies, federal agencies, land management agencies, everybody who's a stakeholder in the world of wildfire, which in Sonoma County is pretty much everybody at this point. The second requirement is that it identifies areas for hazardous fuels reduction and recommends types and methods for treatment. And third, it needs to recommend measures to reduce the ignitability of structures or home hardening. This has increasingly over the last decades become recognized as one of the most critical elements of loss reduction in these wildland-urban interface fires, is to address the problem from the house outwards. The CWPP is not a regulatory document. The things that end up in the CWPP do not have to be done. There's no mandate to do them, and there's no funding attached to doing them. It's, again, driven and informed by the stakeholders. The risk assessment uses geographic information system technology to help us better understand what the wildfire risks are, where the areas are most at risk, and then we'll provide community descriptions that include the landscape, the vegetation, maybe the history, the sociology of the area, and then we'll provide prioritized list of community preparedness projects as proposed to us by all of you folks out there. So your role in this is critical. What we hope that it does on the broader scale is greatly increase understanding of wildfire risks by using these science-based assessments and modeling, which are just an awesome step forward for us. And we can, by doing this, it's going to also compile data which you, the community members and stakeholders, can use to help you create and write grant projects to reduce risk in your area, because you'll now have access to a lot of data in an easy place to get it all, which is going to be super helpful. Collaboration is so important, too, because it really brings greater community and agency commitment to each other, building more robust relationships, and increasing resource sharing and cooperation between agencies and all the folks out there who live in the area. The other really great thing that will come out of this is that one of the big challenges we have in Sonoma County is that we're one of the most highly parcelized forests in the country, which means that most of our forested environments are in small parcels of, say, 40 to 100 acres, which means that anytime you want to do a very large fuels reduction project in a forested area, you have to have contracts with all of the people who own all of those parcels in all of those areas. So hopefully this process will help us to make that process a little easier and more possible. Having a CWPP doesn't guarantee grant funding. However, there are several grant projects out there that should prioritize projects that are listed in a CWPP. So it's great to have the projects listed in the CWPP. And it's really going to help organize and develop really good grant projects, so it's easier for everybody to write them, and they will be more successful. But it's important to remember, too, that there's more to wildfire prevention than finding grants to do enormous projects. I think some of the best projects that we can take on are small projects that are taken on by those in the community for the community based on knowing, geez, we found this risk here, and we can fix this ourselves. So I'm really hoping that we will be able to launch a lot of those projects as well. I'm super excited about where this is going to go. The 2016 CWPP, which can be seen at firesafesonoma.org in the documents section, was signed before the 2017 fires. And the degree of interest in wildfire prevention between then and now is enormous. There is a much, much higher interest for obvious reasons. I'd recommend you take a look at the existing CWPP, especially look at the area that focuses on where you live. The organization, the geographic organization we used in 2016 was by the CAL FIRE battalions. We're changing that for the new one to use the supervisory districts, which are a little smaller, more discrete. So that will change as we move on. But take a look at it. The difference, it's going to be quite a different product at the end of the day. The 2016 was largely a paper product. This is going to be a wildfire hazard story map, which Esther will be talking a lot more about in a few minutes. And we're also integrating the CWPP into the County of Sonoma multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, which also puts it into the general plan update. And my fine partner in crime, Lisa Hewlett from Permit Sonoma, is in charge of that, and she can jump in and talk about the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan.
Sure, thanks, Cara Leone. So just as a little background, for those who are not familiar with what a hazard mitigation plan is, it is a funding vehicle for local governments and special purpose districts to gain access to FEMA funding to mitigate risk to not just wildfire, but the whole suite of natural hazards that may occur. The county in 2016, before there was a wildfire problem, had a local hazard mitigation plan, which some of the cities and towns, city of Santa Rosa, town of Windsor, had their own local hazard mitigation plans. And it really siloed the risk management strategies and projects that were done. After 2017, when it became apparent that disaster did not respect neighborhoods or political boundaries, we are encouraged by Cal OES to develop a multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan that will address multiple natural hazards throughout the county and fulfill the requirements for enhanced mitigation under the Robert T. Stafford Act, amended by the Disaster Relief Act of 2020. What that means is the Community Wildfire Protection Plan will be part of that bigger multi-jurisdiction plan as an appendice or an annex into that plan. And so the projects that are incorporated in this plan will also be eligible for that very hard to get FEMA funding, which previously it was not. I mean, not the plan, a lot of great projects came from it, but being attached to a multi-jurisdiction plan raises its priority level in terms of being eligible for FEMA funding. So the CWPP is going to expand upon and be annexed into this larger hazard risk reduction strategy and improve our understanding of wildfire risk and vulnerabilities at the local, state, and federal level. When I say that what is happening in Sonoma County is informing what is happening on the national level, I am not exaggerating. We, through this process and through other wildfire risk assessments and modeling, are showing FEMA how wildfire risk can be identified, mitigated, and projects on the ground. So this planning process, the CWPP, will receive formal adoption by the state and final approval by FEMA. And I'm going to put the link. Oh, it's already up there. Gosh, someone is good. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And we are going to be having our first public meeting of this planning process on February 25th.
Thank you, Caroline and Lisa, for that great introduction. And we know this is a very complex subject. If you have questions about CWPP specifically, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. And if someone asks a similar question to yours, you can upvote their question with that little thumbs up icon. And also let us know if there are questions that you're most interested in hearing answered by upvoting for those questions. And we have a question that came in earlier from Will Abrams that I'm going to go ahead and read for Caroline to answer. How will we ensure this wildfire protection plan is integrated? Oops, I have to make my screen bigger. Hold on a second. Is integrated with others. There we go, is integrated with other CWPPs across the county, like the city of Santa Rosa, et cetera, and the PG&E Wildfire Mitigation Plan. Will the county be participating in the PG&E Wildfire Mitigation Plan process through the workshops of the Public Utilities Commission happening next week to ensure an integrated strategy? So Caroline, take it away.
The locally developed CWPPs, like the City of Santa Rosa, and there's one for the Upper Markwest Watershed, will all be added to the countywide CWPP as appendices. So they will be part of the document at the end of the day. We're certainly hoping to coordinate with PG&E. That's clearly a very important aspect. So we would love to be participating with them in any way we can.
Thank you. Go ahead, Roberta, please.
Yeah, and I do want to share with everybody, don't use an existing local CWP as a cop-out in terms of getting involved in this process. You know, in other words, what I'm saying is, if you've got a locally developed CWP, that doesn't give you a get out jail card and say that, oh, well, they're going to fold it in and take care of it. Life is good. It's still important to be engaged in this process moving forward. So in my opinion, if you have a locally crafted CWPP, that's good. But for a second, pretend you don't and still engage in this process.
Thank you, Roberta. We have a question about access. Will the CWPP be addressing access issues in the community? Although I'm not sure which type of access. So I've asked the person who put the question up to define that for us. And while we wait for that, we have a question from Lisa Yoshida. Hi, how does the county CWPP connect with the resiliency plan as well as the priorities for the use of the PG&E funds the county received? It seems like multiple silos again.
So with regard to the Office of Recovery and Resiliency, we coordinate with the office, and we are going to be looking at some of the strategies that were included there for the wildfire section. And in addition, this, and I meant to talk about this, the multi-jurisdiction plan will be become part of the public safety element in the general plan update. So there will be multiple connections with both the Office of Recovery and Resiliency and the general plan. And I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
Yes. Priorities for the use of PG&E funds, the county.
Yes, so the use of PG&E funds, I don't have a window into how those funds will be distributed. I recognize the Board of Supervisors is looking at a number of different ways. We have applied for FEMA Building Resiliency and Infrastructure in Communities grant, and we're hoping that the PG&E funds can be utilized to help provide cost share, but we do not have control over that funding or how that cost share will be used. And it's an ongoing discussion with the Board of Supervisors, the public, and stakeholders.
Thank you, Lisa. And
you're welcome.
Janet responded in terms of, will the CWP be addressing access issues in the community, meaning one way in and out? And absolutely, we want to hear that from you through the public process. And we have our public meetings later this spring. That's something we'd like you to identify in this process. It's a critical part of a CWPP is to identify issues such as that and then identify potential solutions. We're running out of time. Boy, let's do last question. Will state parks be part of this new CWPP dealing with wildfire mitigation, forest planning? And Caroline, I believe are state parks on board on the steering committee yet?
Yes, they are. We do have representatives from the state park, and they will be part of the discussion and the solutions.
Thank you. And there was a question about the multi-jurisdiction plan, and I encourage you to reach out to Lisa directly or attend the public meeting on the 25th for that.
Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that planning process, how it's rolling out, who's participating. Contact me directly. It's a very complex topic in and of itself, and I don't want to take up too much of the time at this meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And there were a couple questions about engagement, and that's actually where we're going to next in the agenda. And we're going to be saving all the questions, and we'll hang out online for about 15 minutes afterwards to answer any questions we can't get to. And if not, we'll address them and post them online. So thank you for those great questions. I'm now going to tell you more about the public engagement process we've designed for the Sonoma County CWPP update. As Esther mentioned, I'm leading the engagement and outreach component of this update. So the process summary includes tonight's kickoff meeting. So this is our very first meeting. We haven't met with any of the agency reps or anybody. We're starting tonight with this general public meeting to let everybody know what the plan is. We will be developing a steering committee of key agency and organization partners, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And Esther will be talking to us tonight about the risk assessment process that's getting started now, that Esther and Mark will be leading. Then we'll be having, Esther will be telling you about a story map, and that's going to be our online hub site, we call it, for you to be able to track what's going on, the data that we've developed, what you think of it, how you might want to change things, and to send us your input. And again, we'll tell you a little bit more about that soon. Then we're going to do a series of 5 public input meetings this spring, and those are going to be organized around your supervisorial districts. As Caroline mentioned, we're organizing this CWPP around the supervisors' districts. We hope to be able to facilitate breakout groups by geographical areas within each of those 5 meetings, so we can actually do some online mapping and updating our community-based map, including your identification of local hazards and risks and your priorities for projects to address these risks and hazards to prepare your community. Therefore, it will be important for you to attend the input meeting for where you live. You're welcome to attend the others, but it won't be as relevant in terms of sharing data and mapping in the meeting. After those meetings, Esther and Mark will continue the risk assessment, incorporating your input that we receive from the public meetings. And then we will later be drafting the content of the CWPP, meaning that we're going to write the plan, and much of it will be online. And once the draft plan is complete, which we expect this coming fall, we will release a public review draft for your review and input again at that time. Meanwhile, throughout the process, you will be able to provide input via the story map, as well as via the Permit Sonoma website and project email that I'll share again. So once we release the public review draft, this probably late fall, towards the end of the year, we'll have 5 more public meetings also by supervisorial district to receive your input on the plan. And those we are planning for this coming winter following fire season. So stay tuned for that. Then following your review and the incorporation of your comments, we'll produce a final CWPP for agency review and signing, as Carol Leone and Chief Nichols both mentioned to us. And then as Lisa explained, the CWPP will be added as the wildfire chapter in the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. So it's a pretty intensive process, and we're hoping that many of you will be involved throughout the process. As I mentioned, Permit Sonoma has created a steering committee to help guide this update process, and it includes representatives from the following stakeholder organizations. We have fire agency representatives from the county, from the cities, and from CAL FIRE, land management agencies from the federal agencies like the Bureau of Land Management to state agencies like state parks, and local agencies like the Open Space District, emergency management and law enforcement, who play a critical role in during disasters, representatives from the tribes, and will share with us some of their traditional ecological knowledge, such as around cultural burning. The utilities, various representatives from county departments, and also conservation groups. So that group's going to be starting to meet soon. So as a reminder, and to wrap up this brief presentation on engagement, we do have several opportunities for you as interested residents and community members to engage in this process. Following tonight's meeting, we will have public input meetings later this spring for where you live. You can provide input throughout this process through our online story map, as well as through the county website and email. We will have the public draft available late in 2021 for comments, and then public review meetings to provide additional comments. And so with that, we have time for more questions, and I am going to probably need some help, Kaylin, in terms of which of these questions are related to the process. And remember, you can upvote a question if there's something you particularly want to see answered. So I'm going to do a quick look. So that's been answered.
It looks like Ellie's question at the bottom.
The steering
committee.
Yeah, thank you. How will the steering committee input be incorporated into this process? The steering committee will help us make decisions throughout the process, including helping us to identify the data for the community base map, any issues that come up along the way that seem to need a larger conversation, discussion around and decision. The steering committee will be providing that guidance. Anything else anybody on the panelists want to add in terms of the steering committee? And will the steering committee be public as in the HMP steering committee? Are they all the same people? Environmental groups, social justice, equity groups? They're not the same people. They are public meetings in terms of there'll be Zoom meetings that anybody can participate in. And if you have recommendations for environmental, social justice and equity groups that you think need to participate, please send them to us with the email. Kayla, would you mind? Oh, it's already in the chat. The permit Sonoma-Wildfire Plan at sonoma-county.org. We definitely welcome your suggestions. Let's see. How will language access be covered in this process? Will be extra attention given to communities of color. Certainly, we're looking at how to make everything in the process bilingual, which we started with tonight. And if there are other languages that need to be addressed, I assume that we will do that for various geographical meetings. So in a certain district, there are people that speak another language. That's something we can look into for each of those meetings. And again, if you have recommendations for languages that we should cover in a specific area and how to more effectively incorporate communities of color, please do let us know. That's something that is important to many of us, especially me. Let's see, what else? Have steering committee members already been selected? By whom are CERT or COPE represented? Caroleon, do you mind if I pass this one on to you about the steering committee, who's been chosen to participate in the steering committee? The question is, have steering committee members already been selected? By whom are CERT or COPE represented? And certainly FireSafe Sonoma is involved in the steering committee representing some of those groups.
Yeah, FireSafe Sonoma, we're really hoping that a lot of the input from the CERT and COPE and Watershed Council groups and all the other groups that are acting for wildfire in their communities will be circled up through FireSafe Sonoma. So you'll be hearing more from us about opportunities to participate as we move on. But absolutely, they're a really important element in all of this.
Yeah, and Caitlin and I for FireSafe Sonoma, we've already started a process whereby those local community groups can attend meetings that FireSafe Sonoma will be holding specific to this process, specifically for those local community groups to bring their input, inquiries, comments, concerns forward. So stay tuned with FireSafe Sonoma's emails and our Facebook posts and all that to stay tuned in terms of when we have these meetings. And when you see them, feel free to jump in, because what we FireSafe Sonoma learn from those meetings will be carried forward into the steering committee.
And if I could jump in, it's also the Department of Emergency Management who will help reach out and into those groups through this process and the multi-jurisdiction hazard planning process as well. So.
Thank you. And there was a question, since we signed up for this webinar, are we automatically going to receive future meeting notices, or do we need to sign up elsewhere? Yes, you will receive future meeting notices. They will come from the email address, the permit Sonoma-Wildfire-Plan at sonomacounty.ca.gov. If you don't want to receive our emails, when you get an email following this, you can reply back and let us know. And with that, I think we need to move on, and we will take some more of these questions afterwards if we have time. And with that, Esther Mendano from Digital Mapping Solutions will tell you about the risk assessment that is being developed for the CWP update. So Esther, take it away.
Thank you, Tracy. So what is a wildfire risk assessment? There are many ways to define and do a wildfire risk assessment. They can be GIS-based or non-GIS based. As a reminder, GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and it involves using computers to manipulate spatial data. Some risk assessments focus on homes and others focus on natural resources. Regardless of the focus, a fire risk assessment essentially does three things. It determines fire hazard, which is the ability for a fire to burn and spread. It determines fire probability, which is the ability for a fire to start or the presence of ignition sources. And then it assesses our community values against fire hazard and probability. So in other words, where you have something you care about, there's a high likelihood that a high intensity fire will destroy it, then those are the areas you want to highlight for fuel mitigation. Alternatively, you can also highlight areas where fire might be a benefit to natural ecosystems. Next slide, please. So what data is used in a wildfire risk assessment? For this effort, we will use publicly available data sources only. Most of the data will come from Sonoma County or their partners in land management like CAL FIRE, the Bureau of Land Management, Land Trust, and state parks. The data also needs to be complete across the entire county. Inputs into the risk assessment will include things like a landscape file that was developed from the high resolution Sonoma veg map data, which is available at sonomavegmap.org. We'll also include extreme weather data derived from the North American Regional Reanalysis Program operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In addition, we'll use proximity to impervious surfaces. And finally, we'll include our community values, of which there are many. So a risk assessment overview. The components of a risk assessment will include fire hazard, which will be determined by predicted flame lengths and an analysis of areas that experience extreme wind speeds, along with low relative humidities during the 2017, 2019, and 2020 fire season. We will also include fire probability, and this will be determined by proximity to roads and proximity to power lines. We also wanted to include a component that quantified wildfire suppression response. For this, we will use the nationally developed suppression difficulty index that considers topography, fuels, expected fire behavior under severe fire weather conditions, firefighter line protection rates in various fuel types, and the distance from roads or trails. And all of that to quantify relative suppression effort. And the very last component of the risk assessment will be our community values, as I said before. So we'll get to more details on what constitutes a community value later in this presentation. So these four main components will be combined to create an overall wildfire risk assessment. We anticipate the range of values will be from 0 to 10 or something similar. Regardless of the range, the areas with a high number will indicate potential areas for fuel mitigation. However, areas with a low number may still warrant projects. Other assessments. While creating some of the data layers for the overall wildfire risk assessment, we may also create data such as the number of spot fires generated during a simulated fire growth. These data can be used to create an EmberCast assessment. We may also take advantage of other concurrent analyses that are being developed for the county's hazard mitigation plan that will include a structural loss assessment. So FEMA Community Lifelines. What is a community lifeline? Who developed them and why are they important? The Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, created community lifelines to reframe incident information to understand and communicate incident impacts using plain language, and to promote unity of effort across the whole community. While lifelines were developed to support response planning and operations, the concept can be applied to any community planning process. Efforts to protect lifelines, or what we also call community values, prevent and mitigate potential impacts to them, thus strengthening a community's resiliency. This is why they are important. You can read more about community lifelines online by searching for FEMA Community Lifelines. And I think we'll also put a link in the chat. Next slide, please. So, sorry.
That's okay. Let's see if I can get my video started. So now that you've heard a little bit about wildfire risks, please answer the next Zoom poll regarding wildfire risks. And Amanda, please launch the poll. And I'm going to read it first in English and then in Spanish. What do you think is the primary wildfire risk in your area? Number 1, overgrown vegetation near homes. Number 2, roadside vegetation. Number 3, nearby forests or wildland areas. Number 4, one-way out or limited evacuation routes. And number 5, if you have an idea for something else, please tell us in the chat. Y en español, sobre los riesgos de incendio forestal, ¿cuál cree que es el principal riesgo de incendio forestal en su área? 1, exceso de vegetación cerca de hogares. 2, vegetación al borde de la carretera. 3, bosques o áreas silvestres en la cercanía. 4, rutas de evacuación limitados o con un solo acceso. Y 5, otro. Cuéntanos en el chat. So let's see. Give you all another moment to vote. We've got some others coming in, unhardened homes adjacent to the WUI. So that is our, let's see if I can go back on my slide. And then we've got, lots of them, all the above. Yes, Zoom will only let you answer one. Highly flammable homes and landscaping, proximity wildland, and the one-way out road I live on. Ember intrusion seriously impacts structures, often not a focus. Homes not adequately hardened. And they're keeping coming in. And with that, I think it looks like we're not getting any more new votes. Amanda, if you could go ahead and end the poll and share the results with everyone. So everyone should be able to see that. If her quiz would have answered all the above if an option, that's a good one. What do you think is a primary wildfire risk? And so 25% have said overgrown vegetation near homes. The largest was nearby forest and wildland areas, 33%. 27% say one way out or limited evacuation. And then the 13% is many of those others. And 2% have told us roadside vegetation. So thank you for that. And we are going to get back to Esther's presentation.
Thank you. It'd be great to address all that is coming in through the chat, but we'll stick to the program. So community-based map. A key component of the CWPP process is developing a community-based map. A community-based map compiles all of the known features within Sonoma County that we as a community think are important to consider. The community-based map won't be just one map. It will include many thematic maps. For this effort, our community-based map will be presented as an interactive online story map, and I'll explain what that is on the next slide. So all that a story map is an online site that combines narrative text, images, videos, and interactive maps to convey information. A story map is a web map that has been thoughtfully created, given context, and provided with supporting information so it becomes a standalone resource. So it integrates all that stuff, all the maps, the legends, text, photos, videos, and provides functionality that helps users explore the content. There are many examples of story maps being used to support outreach efforts for CWPPs. An advantage of using a story map is that much of the content that traditionally goes into a CWPP can be presented online instead, creating a leaner document. Another benefit is that the online content is more easily shared and updated. An example of an online community-based map. So on this slide, we have an image showing an example of a community-based map presented as an interactive online story map. This example includes individual tabs for each thematic map, and it is interactive, meaning you can zoom in and out on the maps. It is engaging, meaning you can click on features to get more information about them, and it is relatively easy to use. A link to this example will be placed in the chat box, or you can search for Napa County Community-Based Map online. On this slide is an example of an online CWPP summary. So story maps can take on many forms. And in this example created for the Marin County CWPP, a summary of each chapter is presented in a journal type format. It includes sections for each chapter in the document. And like all story maps, it is interactive, engaging, and easy to use. A link to this example will be placed in the chat box so you can search for Marin County Community Wildfire Protection Plan 2020 update. So I'm going to go through this slide really quick. I'll be fast, but hopefully we'll have time at the end to answer questions. So community values equals community lifelines. So on the slide is a graphic that shows each of the 7 female community lifelines represented, as well as an 8th identified by our team. We'll go through them quickly. The first is safety and security. And so that's things like law enforcement, fire service, search and rescue, and so forth. And for our risk assessment, we'll likely just include fire station locations, evacuation centers, and clean air centers, and things like that. The second is food, water, shelter, and agriculture. And for our risk assessment, the layers that we'll include, the data layers that we'll include is probably going to be things like agriculture sites and fields, structure density, mobile home parks, as well as tribal resources. The third community lifeline is health and medical resources. Oh, I'm sorry, just health and medical. And so there's things like hospitals and medical facilities. The fourth is energy. And so that's, our power substations and power lines will be included. The fifth is communications. And that will likely, in our risk assessment, will take the form of communication towers and wildfire camera locations. The sixth is transportation. So those are critical road infrastructure that supports evacuations or roads that will target for roadside treatments. The seventh lifeline is hazardous materials. And for this, we'll probably just include hazardous materials facilities that have been permitted by the county. And lastly, we have our natural resources category, which is not a FEMA community lifeline, but it's definitely something that's important to most Sonoma County residents. And that'll include things like riparian corridors, drinking water source watersheds, erosion potential, wildlife corridors, and tribal resources. All of these community values will be considered in our risk assessment. If there are things that we have missed, please let us know. Your input can and will be used to guide our risk assessment.
Thank you, Esther. Let's see if I can get, so now that you've heard more about the risk assessment, we'd like to hear from you regarding community assets. So Amanda, you can go ahead and launch this next poll. Which of the following assets is most important to you? And again, we apologize, it wouldn't let us give you the option to answer more than one or all of the above. Life safety, homes, natural areas, infrastructure, business, economic, or others. You can tell us in the chat. En español, ¿cuál de las siguientes bienes es más importante para usted? 1, seguridad vital. 2, hogares. 3, áreas naturales. 4, infraestructura. 5, negocios o económicos. Y 6 otros, cuéntanos en el chat. And we'll give folks a few more minutes to respond. And then Esther, I'll be sending a couple questions your way here, the ones towards the end of the Q&A. Here we go. It looks like we've got all the responses in. Go ahead, Amanda, and share the poll results. And so what we've heard from you is that 65% of you think life safety is most important, followed by homes and natural areas, both at 16%, and a little bit more in the chat. So thank you for that. I will stop that sharing and we're going to move on to some questions. Esther, has the Sonoma veg map been updated to reflect changes in plant communities due to the recent wildfires? Different veg communities and thus fuel hazards will dominate areas post-fire.
Good question. So the veg map itself was not updated after the 2017 fires, but they did capture more LiDAR data. I'm not going to explain it right now. It takes too long to, but they did capture more data for the burned areas after the 2017 fires. So it didn't capture the Kincaid fire, didn't capture the glass fire, but it did give us an opportunity to change the fuel model that is going to be the basis of the fire behavior predictions. And so, and we can do a crosswalk. We could figure out what the burn severity was, in the Kincaid fire and in the glass fire, and we could make some educated guesses about what we think the veg type will be, and therefore what the fuel type will be, and update that landscape file. Because you're right, it's absolutely critical that that base layer gets used, is going to determine a lot, and so getting that right will be important. Did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
The next question is, how thorough will the digital satellite data be ground truth for the fire risk assessment? Many of the recent burned areas still have quite a bit of standing vegetation, so somewhat related. Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah. We don't have in the budget to do any ground truthing. I think it is critical. I mean, if you know of an area that we have completely wrong, then please let us know, and we can make a concerted effort to either go out there on our own time and make the necessary changes.
Let's see, and there was a request to share the chat. We will share the resources and the questions and answers on the county website. And looking to see, there are a couple that have been up here for a bit. And this one would be for our county participants. It's a bigger question than just a risk assessment. As a follow-up to Lisa's great question, how will we measure the success of the plan? Will we measure the reduction of the wildfire risks achieved through this plan? And will those measures be shared with insurance industry so that they can support available and affordable insurance across Sonoma County? There's someone from Permit Sonoma who'd like to answer that question.
I can take on, this, how will we measure the success of this plan? I mean, there's a couple of different metrics. One is by implemented projects, one by the reduction in wildfire over time and the protection of houses, that a catastrophic wildfire, does not burn an entire community. Yes, this information will be shared with the insurance company, and we are looking at a number of options, including risk pools to help to lower, premiums. But that is a pie in the sky idea at this point, and not something that I can say is an active strategy, but we're looking at a lot of different innovations and success. Carleon, maybe you can articulate a little better. I mean, life and property are protected.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think our goal for the plan is to provide a lot of information to the public so they know what to do and how to do it. And then from that, we'll start to see what is it that we can do to help people do those things. Are those large grant projects where we're providing some kind of incentivization for hardening of homes and fuels reduction? Is it more education and outreach? What is it? I think that as we go through the process, we'll start to see more what is needed. And hopefully the insurance companies will start to recognize those efforts on the ground in their rates. However, the insurance companies are their own entities and make decisions on their own. So, in other words, the CWPP won't have a huge effect on what they do or do not do.
Thank you. There's a question that came in earlier about, from Jeffrey Peters Cope. Cloverdale ASTI worked with Sonoma County GIS on a resource and hazard mapping program where volunteers went neighbor by neighbor and used iPads to stand next to water sources, propane shutoffs, hazmat storage, etc. And by selecting a symbol, they mapped each parcel. Those data were then added to initial fire attack maps available to any first responders assigned to our neighborhoods. When we wanted to expand this program to all of the other COPEs, we were told GIS couldn't support us. I assume that means county GIS. Sounds like a great program. Is there anyone who can respond to that? We don't have anybody here with us.
Well, that sort of sounds like a project to me, right? Can we find money to help support that? And that's one of the things that the CWPP will do, is that we'll have these lists of projects. Yeah, we want money to support people who want to map their water tanks and their gates and their bridges and all of those small details that are out there, especially in the rural areas, which are pretty hard for fire agencies to know where they are unless it's the community who's going out and getting them. But there's always going to be a resource consideration. That is expensive work to do, all the mapping, all the compilation of data. So even if the the data is collected by the community, there's still an investment in adding it in. So, yeah, that'd be a great project. So keep working with us through the process, and we'll make sure that it ends up in the priority list.
And just to add on to that is that through this process, we're getting Fire Safe Sonoma up to speed using a lot of the modern geospatial software. So they may be the vehicle to help maintain all that database.
Thank you. Yeah, great idea, great project. Let's make it happen. We have another related question. I think you've already answered this, Esther. In light of the massive changes to the county landscape and forest vegetation over the past 5 years, it is great to update the CWPP, but if most of its maps reflect pre-2017 veg data, it'll be out of date before you finalize it in 2022. Would you like to speak to that at all?
I can a little bit. I mean, we're dealing. I'm working on the Napa County CWPP right now, and we had finished their fire risk assessment like a week before the August at the LNU fire. And so it was like, oh, I guess, half of Napa has just burned, and it was definitely out of date. And we went out and toured the areas that had burned, and the places that were nuked. Guess what? It's probably it was a lot of shrub, and it's good in 5 years, it's going to be shrub again. So while I agree that yes, it'll be sort of outdated, the likelihood that the same vegetation type is going to grow there again is pretty high. I mean, obviously there's climate change issues, but I mean, in the time frame that we're looking at, CWPPs usually they have an update process of usually about 2 to 5 years. That's 2 years is very ambitious. 5 years is nice and probably more realistic. So since we're looking at that time frame, the type of vegetation that we see today is probably going to be very similar in 5 years from now, even though it's been burned.
Thank you. And Esther, you mentioned Ember cast assessment. Can you define what that means and explain how you would do it?
Sure. Yeah. So the software that we use is called FlamMap, and what it does when you not when you do the deterministic fire behavior modeling, but when you do fire growth modeling, you get one of the metrics that it'll spit out is spotting distance and spotting, and the number of spot fires. And so based on that, you can do some analyses that'll kind of be just like, oh, okay, well, if this one area is producing so many spot fires and the wind is blowing them this way, then you can kind of do a really good example is in the Santa Rosa CWPP. They did exactly this type of analysis. They were able to do it for the city of Santa Rosa because it's such a small area, and they only did it on, I think, 2 or 3 representative fires. And so it's because it's based on fire growth, it's a little bit harder to do on a countywide basis. But we're going to look into how we might be able to use that data to help get at the big issue of those embers spotting from such a long way away. But like I said, we're going to be looking at it. I can't tell you exactly how we're going to do it right now because that is a challenge. It's a challenge to kind of come up with that.
Thank you. Let's see, we've got 2 more questions. Let's see if we can get through them quickly. From Janet, risk assessment through Verisk is used by insurance companies to determine insurability. Will risk assessment through CWPP be shared with this private company and efforts also shared? So I can tell you that all the assessment will be public information. It will be on the story map. The data will be available for anyone to download, and whether the insurance industry and private companies choose to share that information back, I think you need to take that up with them. That would be lovely if they would. And then Tom Conlon, read community values. Will the plan differentiate, prioritize food agriculture over non-food income producing activities? Should, don't you think? And I Esther, you can cover this. I know we did talk about some of the critical food agricultural areas in the community values list. Go ahead.
You wanted me to answer that?
Yeah, was there anything else about that?
No, that's a decision that we'll probably make in one of the steering committees. But I agree.
Well, it's, I think that, what we're looking at is wildfire risk. And, how is that, wildfire risk is the issue. And whether that comes from a non-food or a food producing from a risk standpoint, it's all the same. It's just about risk. And that's what we're looking for.
And from the risk standpoint, I would assume, looking at land use categories, from a project standpoint, since this is a federally funded project, activities that are non-food and illegal from a federal perspective will not be considered for funding, like cannabis.
Yeah, one of the things though to be aware of is that when we get into the mitigation element of this and start looking at potential projects or ways to mitigate those risks, keep that in mind as you move forward through the risk assessment process, because one of the things that's crucial in the risk assessment process is also, in addition to the obvious, but there's also the risk to commerce. And in the CWPPs I've worked on, I've reminded folks when they look at the risk, it's like, okay, if you've got a large business in the community, that if that business went away, it would have a huge impact on the community. That's a risk that you want to probably protect and look at from that perspective. Like if you got a Google in the middle of a rural area, and if that Google company went away and it killed the entire, community, that's a big deal. So that would be a way to look at industry in terms of prioritizing your risks.
Yes, and we look at them in terms of community values and assets as well. And so when we have those 5 public meetings around the county this spring, it will be important for us to get that information on maps and also in lists. Where are those important areas in your community? So speaking of that, I want to summarize the public engagement process. Thank you, Esther, for your introduction to the risk assessment, and Carly-Ann for your introduction to CWPPs. So as Sonoma County residents, you will all be able to engage in this process in several ways. We're going to have these 5 public meetings this spring. They will be organized by your district. So please make an effort to attend the one for where you live. That's where you'll be able to have the most input. If you can attend that, you'll be able to provide input through the online story map throughout this process. You can also sign up for updates on the county website and email us through the project email. And Kaylin is putting those links into the chat again for you. And then when we have a draft plan, late fall, winter, probably later this year, then we will want your comments on that plan, both written and in the set of public meetings. So we have a lot of opportunities for you to participate. This plan is a community plan. This is different from other plans in that this comes from the community. A community wildfire protection plan is about what's important to you as community members. So we'd like to hear from you. Some of your questions tonight were great in that vein. So one final poll that we'd like to ask you tonight, and again, we apologize, you can only answer with one response. What do you think is the single highest priority to keep your house from burning in a wildfire? And Amanda, if you could go ahead and launch that poll. So the first is structure or home hardening, which means keeping the buildings themselves from burning. 2, defensible space within 100 feet of homes. That's treating vegetation around homes. 3, both home hardening and defensible space. 4, reducing vegetation in and around communities, so a little further out than defensible space. 5, more firefighters and resources for them. 6, forest and wildland management, or 7, you can tell us in the chat. Y ahora en español, las prioridades. ¿Cuál es la mayor prioridad para mantener su casa protegida de un incendio forestal? 1. Estructura, endurecimiento del hogar. 2. Espacio defendible a 100 pies del hogar. 3. Endurecimiento del hogar y espacio defendible, ambos juntos. 4. Reducir la vegetación dentro y alrededor de las comunidades. 5. Más bomberos y recursos para ellos. 6. Manejo de bosques y o tierras silvestres. Y 7. Otra. Cuéntanos en el chat. And it looks like we've got 80% of people voting. So I think we can go ahead. Oh, one more came in, another came in, last call. Ooh, they're coming in. 85% of people voting. Let's go ahead and call that, Amanda, and if you could share the poll. So 52% think that both home hardening and defensible space are the top priority to keep your home from burning in a wildfire. And that is followed by structure home hardening, and then reducing vegetation in and around communities, and then several of them come in pretty close. Defensible space, more firefighters and resource, forest and wildland management. And let's see, and then we've got a comment, strict regulations around future buildings in the WUI. And we do have a couple questions related to that we will get to in just a moment. First, I want to remind you where you can get more information. The Permit Sonoma CWP website, sonomacounty.ca.gov /fire-prevention/wildfire-plan. The Fire Safe Sonoma website, and especially if you're interested in seeing the local CWPPs for your community and what your local fire safe councils and COPE groups and CERTs are up to, www.firesafesonoma.org. You can reach us through our email, project email, permit-sonoma-wildfire-plan at sonoma-county.org. Again, that's permit-sonoma-wildfire-plan at sonoma-county.org. And finally, you can find Permit Sonoma on Facebook at facebook.com/Sonoma County PRMD, and Twitter at SoCoPRMD or at SOCOPRMD. And with that, I think we have about 5 minutes for any final questions, and then we're going to close up at 8:30, but we will stay on to answer any questions that we have not been able to get to yet. And the first one, and I know, Carleon, this is something you're interested in. Rebuilding with home hardening measures beyond WUI standards is costly. Our home using concrete wall panels is costing between 25 to 35% more than normal wood stick construction. It is difficult to choose this path when building costs are already bank blowing. Are you planning on any incentives to help homeowners choose this path, including some kind of certification to provide to insurance companies in an attempt to lower rates or keep insurance? Go ahead, Carleon.
Yeah, home hardening is, as those of you who've known me over the years, is really my thing. I am a great adherent for home hardening techniques, and that's a super important component in it, and it can be expensive. I get that. We are launching some pilot programs at Permit Sonoma to begin to look at how do we do incentives for home hardening, especially on existing structures. It's a complicated process that people are only just starting to do across the country. So this is some pretty exciting pilots that we have coming up. Insurance companies, again, I'll say it again, they have their own certifications and their own plans for how they do stuff. Increasing dialogue with them is certainly important, and we're certainly trying to do that. But they are independent companies, and they're going to do what they do. on their own. But yeah, the more we can get assistance out to folks to upscale their hardening, especially in rebuilds and in existing structures, is a pretty high priority. And hopefully, again, those will be projects that will end up listing in the CWPP. That's the kind of thing that we want to have in there at the end of the day. These are the things that we think that we need to reduce loss of risk in our WUI communities.
Thank you. Blake Hooper asked, will the plan be used by the county to help inform zoning and land use requirements automatically, or will the plan's outcomes be treated as advisory? And certainly Lisa talked about the CWPP being the chapter to the hazard mitigation plan and all that being added to the general plan. Lisa, would you like to add anything else?
I think that kind of speaks to it. The multi-jurisdiction plan will be, added to the general plan as the public safety element, and the wildfire plan will be annexed into that multi-jurisdiction plan. So as it moves through the process and the both plans are presented to the Board of Supervisors for consideration and hopefully approval, this science-driven approach will ultimately inform policy. Exactly how the planning process evolves is still yet to become, but that is the mechanism, or those are the mechanisms for getting the CWPP and the hazard plan to inform county policy and regulation.
Thank you. There's a question, perhaps the county can fund a PACE-like loan program from home hardening renovations. And I know that the state legislature approved a PACE program for home hardening a couple years ago. So far, no one in the state has started it, although apparently a few of the companies that work on PACE for energy are starting to look into the wildfire side of it, the home hardening. Caroline, I know that your new program will be functioning somewhat like this. Would you like to add any more information to that?
Well, the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program is including several elements of home hardening in their loan program. So if you go ahead and search for SCEIP, Sonoma County Energy Independence Wildfire, you can read about where they're at in their process of making all of that move forward. I think there's a lot of people working on trying to circle this up and figure out how we can make that happen, because it is extremely important in keeping homes from burning down. So we're all interested in moving that forward.
Yeah, so the legislature did approve, PACE to be utilized for both seismic structural hardening and wildfire structural hardening, and that has moved through our board process. And as Carol Leon said, the plan to utilize PACE funding is in, I don't know exactly where it is, but it will be available to homeowners who wish to access that as a funding source to do some subset of ignition-resistant construction.
Thank you. And Will, I just was asking you what HFTD meant, and your question went away. The question was, when we describe different levels of wildfire risk, how will this be defined within HFTDs? Will that be high, medium, low? Will risk reduction ratios, RRR, be assigned to each risk so we can prioritize and measure progress towards our goals and objectives? Anybody know what HFTD is? That's what happens when we use acronyms in alphabet soup. So, and with that, actually, we are out of time. So, Will, we can try to answer that afterwards. Thank you all for being with us tonight and for giving us your time on a Tuesday evening. For more information, you can go to the county's website, sonomacounty.ca.gov /fire-prevention/wildfire-plan, or email us at permitsonoma-wildfireplan@sonoma-county.org. And with that, thank you all so much. And we will stay on for a few minutes if there are any more questions.
And can I put out a special thanks to Kaylin for doing such a great job managing the chat and doing all the stuff she did to make this meeting run smoothly. to Kaylin and Tracy's team. Amanda, yay, thank you guys. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, huge thanks and kudos to the team who pulled this together. Always impressed to work with y'all, and excited to work with the group who attended the call, and look forward to seeing you as we kind of see each other these days on the multi-jurisdiction planning call.
Which will be February 25th.
I'll send out a invite to everyone on this email, and as I mentioned, for questions specifically related to the hazard plan, I will write up a Q&A and distribute it to the entire group and post it on the website.
Thank you. Any other questions? I seem to have lost my Q&A panel. I think we don't have any more open questions.
So the HFTD apparently stands for High Fire Threat District.
CPUC. So it's
Yeah, it's a CPUC thing, yeah.
California Public Utility Commission.
Yeah, sorry, acronyms.
Yeah, maybe we could wrap up a meeting doing an entire sentence of acronyms.
Yeah, you probably could do that.
But I don't want to.
Any other questions from anybody out there in the audience? You can either put them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, we will call it an evening. It's been a long day.
Real quick, can maybe Lisa or somebody, can you explain to whoever's left the different ways they can engage at this point, or where they should look for opportunities to attend the future meetings? Or maybe you, Tracy.
For these virtual meetings or for the hazard mitigation plan?
For the CWPP virtual meetings.
So again, that will be on the county website, which is up on the screen, sonomacounty.ca.gov /fire-wildfire-plan, or through your Fire Safe Sonoma website. And if people go to either of those websites, you can sign up to get notified when any meetings are happening. And we'll be sharing that information on social media, on Facebook and Twitter, maybe Instagram, all the places.
Yeah, just to be clear, for Fire Safe Sonoma, the best place is to stay informed with this moving forward is going to be Facebook, our Facebook page and our Twitter feed. And then if you're a subscriber, if you're one of our email subscribers, then you'll get a customized message emailed to you saying, hey, there's a meeting come up, here's the link, yada, yada.
And that is the Fire Safe Sonoma Twitter is @FireSafeSonoma. So that's a pretty easy one to remember. Thank you, Kaylin. Okay, well, with that, I think we've answered everyone's questions. So thank you, everyone. I think we can stop recording and end the webinar. Good evening.